I'm the last one of a long day, and so this presentation has two main topics. And I like to title those two main topics as the first one is, I think, is an old topic, but needed, still needed. And the second one, I guess, is something new that we need to think about. And so since I started my experience or my, professional journey in applied economics, in agricultural economics, my main question was, okay, we have what we have and how we can use what we have and what is the mission we have while we use, our data and our methods. And the second one is, question what we have all the time. Just don't use or don't get those things as defaults, and then apply what we have without questions. And then the second, main motive in my career has been, okay, then what's next? And so this is more or less, how I frame this presentation. And so when I was working on the presentation, my main point was how can we inform policy as applied economist? And so I got to the first topic, which is basically based on a work I have done with David Just in a book chapter for the Handbook of Agricultural Economics a couple of years ago. And in this book, we have basically reviewed a bunch of policy or food and health-related policies in the last 25 years that have been implemented, mostly in the US. So we go one by one, we review all the studies that have been done in the space of economics, agricultural economics, behavioral economics, and then we also go and look at, okay, what other disciplines have done. And so this has been a great experience for me as a young scholar because, I had the opportunity to read a lot of work that many in this room have done in the past 20 years and to learn from those studies, right? And so here are my, some of the takeaways from this experience. And I guess I will go back to the point that just, has been made about, the use of data and methods to answer research questions, right? So the first point is that we don't have perfect data. And I guess, that has also been the point that Spiro has made today. There is a need of new data to inform policy. And so in this room, there will be people who are very oriented towards secondary data. And so use, scanner data or data from national surveys and use those data to inform policy. And other people in those rooms will use, primary data collection, which could be qualitative data and then also economic experiments or survey that we design. And so there are pros and cons that we observe in all of these data and that we need to deal with, right? And while dealing with this data, we need to understand that at some point, we don't have the perfect data and we don't have the perfect method. And so what can we do as applied economists then to inform policy? And so here are some examples I would like to, discuss, right? When it comes with secondary data, most of the time we work with data that indeed are not very useful, but we try our best to make, a better use of the data. And another main problem that we have is that sometimes, we don't have timely data, and that was very obvious during the pandemic. Indeed, the only data that were published were the ones with survey data. And another one is, the representative, how well our data represent the population. And when we use scanner data, that's a problem that has also been acknowledged by the National Science, the Academy of National Science. And in addition, given those structure, given the type of data we have, then we need to deal with a lot of, modeling issues, right? Self-selection bias, price endogeneity. And in many instances, you will see those papers where, half of those papers, so 70% of those papers deal with data and methods, and then the remaining parts are about policy implications. And then when we go to our policymakers, it's very difficult to translate those findings in something that people will understand. And so, then And a lot of other people say, okay, now let's use economic experiments, let's use data that we create, we know what we want, we can solve endogeneity, and there is a lot of work done to inform policy by journalists in the econ space, but also a lot of people doing the same type of work in food and agriculture in our field. And so even here, it's very difficult, right? Because most of the time, those experiments are done only one time. And so the point is, what is going to happen? Will I observe the same outcomes in a year, in 2 years? And then what we also do is we simplify the environment where people make choices. And so, we have a very low external validity. And so, but what's the point of all of this, right? This is boring. These are methods. But then to me, the main point is that when you look at the effects of a policy, and you need to go back to your policymaker to provide, to inform policy, you will realize that in academia, there are findings that differ, even from the same policy, depending on the data, depending on the methods, and depending on what people do. And so this is basically, a very brief summary of what we found here. So here is the example of primary data versus secondary data. 2 studies looking at whether a nutritional label is effective. And depending on the type of data, you will find a different outcome, right? And so when we provide policy recommendations, the question is, as applied economists, should we just communicate the finding of our study, or should we also, provide information about whether there are mixing findings in academia and why there are those mixing findings? But then we go again, the example of a soda tax. Here we are using, econ versus, other disciplines. And even here, this is more obvious, right? The results are different, and we all know as applied economists that causal inference is important. And, in my opinion, I may be wrong, there are maybe different opinions in the room, but something that is relevant is also, when you have a causal inference. And the last one, I guess it's again the same, right? We are using the same data, exactly the same, data set. Again, depending on how you address most likely endogeneity issues or self-selection issues, you're going to get different outcomes. And so this has been, the work that, the takeaway is that we don't have the perfect data. And when I look at papers published in Journal of Health Economics or even very, top 5 econ journals nowadays, they don't use only one data set. They use multiple data sets to inform policy. And so maybe we should be less snobby about primary versus secondary data and try to work together to inform policy in a more effective way. And then, after reading all of these papers, I would say maybe 250, 300 at a time, I started kind of questioning, right, the type of assumptions we have, regardless of the data, we have. And so when you use scanner data, right, you analyze what people buy. But you don't know what was the consideration set. What was the environment? Someone said before, I think Spiro said, only 25% of US citizens, right, eat fruits and veggies. Or I think it was only fruits. And then my question is, okay, but, do you know the availability of fruits that people will see when they go to the supermarket? And so starting to this idea, I started kind of going to another domain, which is more food environments. And so this is a little bit of a spoiler. I'm going to talk about this at the European Congress. And so what I did here is, okay, we have all of these digital food environments nowadays, and those are opportunities for applied economists. We can really know what people see when they go and buy food online. And so what I did, I became obsessed about this. I web scraped data, and this is a case study in Michigan, but I'm now extending it to different states, I think like 12 states. And so what I did was to, scrape all the data, and now I have in my data set, which I think, is a very nice data set, I have all dish level data, the price for each dish, and obviously all the geographic locations, everything. But then what I did was, okay, let's link the data with nutritional profiles and with carbon emission data. And I have these 3 big data sets all together. And then I started trying to find, patterns. What do people see when they go online and buy food away from home in Michigan through Uber Eats or DoorDash? And so what I found was shocking to me. This is just one, finding. So I know that my plate was mentioned multiple times today. So what I said, okay, this is my plate, right? This is a policy that is implemented, is in the US, and there are a lot of questions regarding, do people know my plate? Do people use my plate? So now the question here is, do people in the US supply food that will mirror my plate recommendations? We all think that all should be on the demand side, but what about the supply side, right? And so this is what I did, and I found, for example, I have different chains. All of these are restaurants. There are over 12 million restaurants, something like this. And what I found is that only 1% of the food items offered are fruits in restaurants. And if you will see then, all the other figures, because this is just the web scrap data, but then we linked those web scrap data to nutritional data and carbon emission data, we will realize that there is a lot of discussions about fruits and veggies, the low consumption rate, but the supply is very low, especially for food away from home. And I guess, Jill, to go back to the NOVA classification, you can use this data set to profile, the food items you have in your scanner data if, you want to test the robustness of your outcomes. Okay, so this is, the question about, should we now start thinking about not only how people respond to policy, but also see, do people have substitutes, right, when they respond to policy? If we introduce a policy on soda, and if you see the data on soda supply, it's huge. Maybe it's the only thing people see when they go and buy food online. So why are we expecting to find a shift in consumption when even people who have desire to buy healthy options don't have those options available? And so keeping, the domain on online, then the next question is, okay, what can we do as applied economists now? A lot of people buy online. This is a USDA-funded project. People buy online. It's like a booming trend. And so now the point is what we can do to inform policy, right? When people buy online. All the policies we have are created for physical environments, not for online environments, right? And so here is basically what we did. We found out that the quality of the food people buy online is pretty low. And my web scrap data actually confirm the trend, but we also see opportunities. Why we don't think as economists or applied economists we can inform policy and think about how can we use existing policies to make them digital. And so here, we developed this app where people can buy food and we deliver food to them. Basically, it's a little bit crazy, very expensive, but and so here, is one example. I have 3 examples here. I think I started from the first one. How to make the label, right? A label more salient. And why is that? Because in many instances, in physical food environments, people don't read because they don't have the time to read. When they go online, they read more, they search more, and so maybe this could be a more effective tool. Same comes with the tax. So here, the literature says that in many instances, people, if I ask you how much did you pay for your pizza the last time you purchased it, do you remember the price? 80% may say, I don't know. Or maybe you have a price, and then if I will follow up with another question like, are you sure about the price you paid? More, from 0 to 100, you will say, maybe just 20%, right? I'm sure the rest I don't remember. And so this is one of the main reasons why when we think about fiscal policies, they don't work well, because people don't see difference in price. First of all, because it's marginal. Secondly, because they don't see it. They see it at the end when they pay, together with all the other items. And so here what we're trying to see is what if we make, these available to people so they can see the price, what will be the response to that? And the last example I have, which I'm very excited, is something I submitted to the USDA last year. So I don't know what it is, or whether it's going to be, funded. I got an email, maybe yes, maybe not. But the idea is, my plate can also become a digital tool where we can inform people about, this is the recommendation, and you can also provide the swap option where you say to people, look, your order is out, it doesn't align with my plate, and you can make a different choice. You can shift the choice and so on and so forth. I guess those are the 3 examples I have here. Again, here another takeaway is that food environments, I think, are very important, and I hope that in the future many of us will work also on the supply side and also see how policy will work under different food environment constraints, not only just assuming that it doesn't really matter, and then also to think about new ways to implement policy to inform the policy debate. That's all I have for today. Thank you.